Hello and welcome to Morningstar. I'm Emma Wall and I'm joined today by Joe Twyman of YouGov. Hello, Joe.
Hi.
So we've just heard from you in your presentation at the Morningstar Investment Conference that there are divisions across Europe, and they're not just about whether you want to be in the EU or not. Along what lines are people increasingly divided?
Well, that's right. In the old days, people would talk about things in terms of left and right, liberal and conservative, and now people think about things in terms of leave and remain. But actually, it's a lot more complicated than that, and there are a number of factors that really define these new groups that we're increasingly looking at in order to understand the country better, not just here, but actually across Europe and developed democracies as well. So that's things like age. The differences in age can have a huge impact on things. Education, social class, but also the way that people look at the world around them. And so some people may look very much inward and see their country as where their future lies. Others will see a more international perspective. And so the contrast of all of these and how they interplay together is really starting to provide a much greater level of detail for the population.
And how important are these divisions when trying to predict the outcomes of the various political decisions that have to be made in the next 12 months?
Well, massively important, because the world, and particularly the political world, has changed over the last 2-3 years. And things that one would not expect to happen based on historical precedent, based on a lot of other information, have indeed occurred, whether it's Brexit, whether it's the election of Donald Trump. And the reasons for those are complicated, but they are linked to the fact that the country is now dividing in different ways. And so there is a group of people within both our population in this country, but also in other countries, who feel that they are dissatisfied, distrusting and disapproving, not just of politicians or political parties, but of political institutions and often the establishment as a whole. They feel that they've been left behind and that the world has moved on in a way that they're not comfortable with, and crucially that they did not consent to. And the implications for that in terms of how the established political parties address it, be it for a referendum campaign or for a general election, are enormous.
Why is it such a surprise that these divisions exist? Because you certainly saw over the last 12 months, as you touched upon, Brexit was not an outcome people were predicting. Donald Trump was, again, not an outcome that the polls predicted. And yet here we are in this political landscape where it's very evident that people are angry. Why were we not aware of that before?
Because in a lot of cases, it's more complicated than simply anger. And so the story of the last parliament in this country was about the rise of UKIP and going from 3% in 2010 to nearly 4 million people voting for them in 2015. And that growing anger, that growing dissatisfaction, distrust, disapproval was very clear when it was manifesting itself in terms of voting for UKIP. And it was pretty certain that the vast majority of those people would then vote to leave the European Union. But the fact that the referendum on the European Union became a referendum on really modern life in general for a lot of people, and became a referendum on the establishment, on the established way of doing things, meant that it was far more difficult to predict, because ultimately it's just a lot more complicated.
And have we reached peak dissatisfaction, or is this just the beginning of something that's going to stretch far out past June the 8th and into other political elections?
When you look at opinion data across all different measures for this sort of thing, what you're interested in are not the individual polls and the small fluctuations or the outliers and everything else. What you're really interested in is identifying the long-term trends. That's what's key here. And so as a political analyst such as myself, I'm looking for the distinction between talking points and turning points. The difficulty we have at the moment is that it's too soon. And we don't know whether Brexit and Trump are the turning points or the talking points, or whether, for instance, France and Austria are the turning points or the talking points. We'll only know perhaps in a number of years' time, but it's one of those questions that we're now focused on heavily.
Prediction for the general election 2017 in the UK?
It'll take place on June the 8th.
Thank you very much, Joe. This is Emma Wall from Morningstar. Thank you for watching.